Joining me now is Jamie Glazov. Jamie Glazov is friends with Annie Cyrus, who we just had on. And they work together on the Glazov Gang. And he's I think his title is like senior editor at frontpagemag.com with David Horowitz. He's an author. He's a host of the show, Jamie Glazov Gang. Wow, he's a busy guy. Do I got that right? Is that your title, senior editor at frontpagemag.com?
Well, I don't know. I'm the editor there. That's good enough. It's an honor to work with David Horowitz at Front Page Magazine, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's a great website. I go to it every day, frontpagemag.com. Hey, you know I'm having David on the show on Friday.
Fantastic.
I'll try not to mess up the time as I did with you last night.
Well, that's okay, but he's a true warrior, a former leftist who left the left, and he's a real hero. He's fighting a very evil idea, and it's an idea that's caused so much destruction, so much suffering, and more than 100 million deaths in the 20th century.
Absolutely. All right, I'm texting back to Mike Lindell because he's getting closer. All right, so again, I hope you guys are spreading the word, telling everybody to tune in here. You should have already. But let's talk about your family and your book. Your family had to escape persecution from what was it? It was the USSR then when they escaped, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. What an honor it is to have been born to two such brave titans, freedom fighters, my dad and my mom. It's a very long story, but in general, they were dissidents in the Soviet Union. They stood up against the Soviet regime. They stood up for freedom, for democracy, for liberty. They stood up for people who were imprisoned. My father signed petitions on behalf of political prisoners, on behalf of prisoners of conscience. He signed the petition against the invasion of Czechoslovakia, and they escaped the Gulag very narrowly. And to make a long story short, that's another 2-hour discussion. But we were also persecuted Christians. I thank my dad and my mom so much for introducing me to Jesus Christ, for raising us as Christians, for having us baptized in our Moscow apartment by my godfather, Father Mien, who was murdered by the KGB many years later. But we were the lucky ones who got out. And when we came to America, I was just a little kid. But Brandon, I could, even as a child, I could smell the oxygen of freedom. And even as a kid, you know when you're in a tyranny. And we come from a slave camp. And when I was just even a kid, and my mom says that my jaw was just dropped open in front of McDonald's and in front of Burger King and all the stores. But it wasn't just that. It was that we didn't have to whisper anymore. We didn't have to, wait for the knock at the door. And in a way, I want to qualify that. We didn't have to whisper in the sense that my dad and my mom didn't whisper. They were very brave. But I fell in love with America. And as I grew older and as I loved America so much, I began to see these species of human beings who were calling my dad a fascist, calling him all these names, telling him that the country he came from was a great place and that the country we were in was an awful place. And these people made excuses for the people who mass murdered my people, for the people who killed members of my family. And they made excuses for Mao Zedong and for Stalin and for Che Guevara and for Castro. And at a young age, I was wondering, who are these people? And I used to ask my dad, who are these people? And he explained to me that they were leftists. And when I was 12 or 13 years old, my dad put a book on my table, and it was Political Pilgrims by Paul Hollander. And that book changed my life. And that book by Paul Hollander is an examination of the leftist mindset and why the left hates its own host democratic society and why it champions totalitarian adversarial cultures and regimes. And so that's where my dedication began. From a very young age, I dedicated myself to defending the beautiful nation that took us in, and I wanted to expose the people and the forces that hate America and that side with the enemy that wants to destroy it.
Well, you've written a book. It's called United in Hate, and it's subtitled The Left's Romance with Tyranny and Terror. And Logan, I'm going to send this over to you real quick. I should have done this before, but I'm going to send it by text or email, Logan? Email. Let me send this over to you, Logan. You should put this up on the screen for people to see this cover, because you can't really do it justice by explaining it. I'll start explaining it, but then we'll let Logan throw it up there to see. Jamie Glazov's book is United in Hate, The Left's Romance with Tyranny and Terror. And as you're about to see, it has somebody sitting at, well, it looks like an art gallery on a bench. And you have a painting of one guy here and a painting of one guy here. And they're sitting in the middle. And the one guy on the left with the hammer and sickle under him is Fidel Castro. And the guy over here on the right of the picture is the leader of Iran at the time and the crescent moon of Islam. And again, this is that left-right syncretism of the red-green axis that we were talking about with Annie Cyrus. That's an excellent book cover. Well done, Jamie. There it is. There it is. The audience is now seeing your book cover. Tell us how you came up with that.
If an audience is seeing my book cover, that's a great thing.
Tell me about it. How'd you come up with that?
Well, look, today, Brennan, why do leftists so much want to wear the mask? What is this thing where they want to inject themselves and they're lining up for this vaccine and they want to do this social distancing and all these weird rituals? You know, we have if you really think about it, what Archbishop Vigano says, you know, it's a replacement for the sacraments in a way. You know, in the Catholic Church, you have communion, you have confession, you have the rituals of worshiping God and Jesus Christ. And there's a replacement now. Something very demonic is going on. We have Fauci and Gates to worship, and we take the vaccine and we put on the mask. This isn't just about the medical world. There's a spiritual battle going on. Now, why I wanted to begin with that is it's all the same thing. The left is always in a romance with some kind of very bizarre and demonic death wish and a worshiping of totalitarianism. So to go back quickly in time with the timeline, we talked about where I'm from. We talked about me arriving in the United States. And so I'm growing up and watching this. I'm watching university professors just worshiping Fidel Castro, and yet at the same time they would be killed in Cuba if they spoke their mind. And so I was very interested in this. Why did they support the North Vietnamese? Why did the anti-war movement did what it did during the Vietnam War? But when the communists took over and the bloodbath started and the boat people were jumping on rafts in the South Pacific, and the Khmer Rouge killed 3 million Cambodians, and what happened to the South Vietnamese people? Where was the left? I thought that it cared for the Vietnamese people. But no, it had an alliance. It aided and abetted the communists there. And it did the same thing over and over again, whether we talk about Castro's Cuba, whether we talk about the Sandinistas, Stalin, Mao, there was always this flirtation with communism. And so after 9/11, I remember I was just sitting one day watching TV, and there's these demonstrations after Bush sent troops into Afghanistan and Iraq. And there's these demonstrations of these leftist feminists marching, screaming Allahu Akbar against the war. And they're marching next to Islamists. And they're screaming Allahu Akbar. And they would be killed within 30 seconds if that was in another environment where there was Sharia implemented. And I thought, here again, we see the left flirting, dancing with a totalitarian entity where they will be devoured. And it happens over and over again. So I decided to sit down and write United in Hate, what explains this leftist romance? I mean, we see it today. Black Lives Matter and Palestinian jihad. We see the radical feminists going to Gaza to help Palestinian terror, and yet they get assaulted and abused by the Palestinian terrorists there. We're constantly seeing this. So I sat down and wrote that book, and I explained the left's romance with this Islamist entity. And we see it today with Rashida Tlaib, Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders, all of them. We see that they're worshiping this. And I gave the background because it's all the same story. It's the story of the fellow travelers, because the leftist fellow travelers traveled to Stalinist Russia to find heaven on earth and to worship there. Many of them got killed. And they did the same thing. I show the fellow traveling to Maoist China. I show the fellow traveling to North Vietnam, to Sandinista Nicaragua, to Castro's Cuba. And then again, they did the same thing after 9/11, and they continue to do it, as our beautiful and wonderful, intelligent Annie Cyrus was saying before me. And this is continuing till this very moment, Brandon.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's an unholy alliance, as David Horowitz calls it. And this is what I want to expose, and what I've dedicated my life to, is the left's flirtation with death. And make no mistake, when the mask prevents breathing, when the mask hides God's image, in Genesis, when God says, "Let us make man in our own image." Brandon, when you and I see each other, we don't recognize God's image necessarily by our elbows, although that also is God's creation. But we see God's image and God's creation in each other's faces.
You know, what's so interesting is...
In whose interest is it to camouflage our faces? So I know I might have been speaking in riddles here, but the puzzle all fits together.
Well, particularly when you talk about Sharia and face coverings, and now all of a sudden everybody's covering, you can only see their eyes, it's starting to feel a little Islamic to me. Am I wrong?
It's starting to feel Islamic, absolutely. You're absolutely right. Great point, and it goes deeper than that. There's a couple layers here. The left hates individualism. It hates the human being. The left hates God's creation, and it hates the fact that individuals are different. We all have different talents. We can all reach our different potentials. The left hates that because Satan hates that. And a lot of people maybe right away when they hear me talking about Satan, oh, well, you're not going to listen to that lunatic. But I'm not trying to reach those people. I want to tell the truth because this is a spiritual battle. And so when there was the leftist flirtation with Maoist China, the left was in love with Maoist unisex clothing. Because you see the differences between humans were erased because everybody was the same, this equality. You have Maoist unisex clothing. Then you have the left's worshiping of the burqa and of the niqab. They very much support that forced veiling. And it's a shame when the left does that because it's so oppressive of women. But you have to understand that that burqa, that niqab, that the veil, the hijab, it is also erasing the differences. It's hiding human beauty. It's hiding our differences. And so Maoist unisex clothing, the hijab, the mask, it's all erasing God's creation and God's image.
Isn't that what we read from the Frankfurt School, the cultural Marxists in the Frankfurt School, and they followed Abraham Maslow, and didn't he teach basically about the higher man, the higher self, and who he thought was the higher man, the higher self, of course, ended up being complete perverts and tyrants. But the Abraham Maslow concept or idea was that they were going to promote the idea of do away with masculinity and femininity and just promote a general humanness, doing away with masculinity and femininity and just going to a general humanness. And that's what they promoted. That's what the Maslow concept and idea was, right? And that's what you're explaining. Let me ask you about the Frankfurt School, cultural Marxism. I mean, you talk about Herbert Marcuse of the Frankfurt School coined the phrase, make love, not war. You talk about his 1965 paper, Repressive Tolerance, where he says we're going to be more intolerant than the right, as he perceived us to be because we believe in absolute truth, or the laws of nature and nature's God, the character and nature of God. He said we'll be more intolerant than the right, and we'll deprive them of freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. Well, here we are in the cancel culture, and that's exactly what they're doing. They're depriving people of freedom of speech and freedom of assembly.
Well, absolutely, Brandon. And they're so for diversity. They're so for equality and diversity, but not the intellectual variety. And, you know, it's very interesting that today when you see these supposed cultural warriors and they're so brave, and I'm around all these leftist milieus today and I see them, they don't dare say a word against the vaccine. Even I know leftists that, they'll take their mask off, but if anybody's taking a picture or, you know, they put their mask back on because they're afraid of what the other people will say, there's no, in their environment, there's no freedom of speech there. It's an echo chamber, and they're very, very totalitarian. And this is what happens in the leftist odyssey. And you hit bingo there too, in the sense of when we talk about this sameness that they're imposing, it's also happening with gender. And we have to be honest in terms of what we see. This is a satanic attack on God's creation, because not only is there in the leftist effort and agenda to impose sameness and to destroy the individual, and that's the opposite of Jesus Christ dying for every single one of us. We have to keep that in mind, and that's what the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution are all based on, the individual. But what is even deeper than that, the individual is important because Jesus Christ died for every single one of us. Now, the opposite of that is the left. The individual doesn't matter, so they're blurring the individuals, but as you're saying, they're also blurring the genders. There's no male, there's no female. They're blurring everything. And let us be honest about something, and let us be very clear. This radical feminist agenda, the attack on the nuclear family. And who heads the nuclear family? The Father. And who is the Father? The Father is our Father who art in heaven. This is a spiritual battle against the core creator of everything. Yes, we believe in the Trinity. There are three, but our Father is the head of everything. And deep within the leftist agenda, whether you have radical feminism, this trans stuff that's going on and all these agendas, it's an attack on the Bible, on the Judeo-Christian tradition, and on our Creator.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's talk about the whole concept and idea of the cancel culture in regards to speaking truth. How long do you think it's going to be, Jamie? How long do you think it's going to be before you can't say these things, or you can't run frontpagemag.com as the editor? Because you probably remember during the Obama administration, there was talk of actually doing public sidewalks on the side of these websites, where you would have to spend all this money building your websites, having the servers, paying for everything, but you'd have to leave a section known as a sidewalk of the website open, so anyone could come on there and post and say whatever they wanted to counter what you were doing. Now, the left, some of the guys in the Obama administration were proposing that. After we pay for everything, we pay for everything. We don't get the government to do it. Then all of a sudden, I've got to give up some of my real estate on my website for them to offer their view. Can you imagine the trash and perversion they'd be bringing on my website? And yet, this is their idea of fairness doctrine, or bringing the fairness doctrine or equal time to the internet. How long do you think before that happens to groups like yours and mine?
Absolutely. Brandon, as somebody that's from that environment, from that evil empire, even as a child, but that is dedicated to fighting that, I can smell that virus, and I know that virus very well. And Ronald Reagan said it very, very profoundly that every generation, maybe I don't have the exact words here, but he was saying that every generation is one generation away from tyranny unless it sheds blood. There has to be a constant battle for freedom, because freedom is not a natural thing in the sense that it's a beautiful thing. God wants our freedom. God gave us free will, and freedom comes from God, but evil hates freedom, and there's a constant assault on freedom. So that's what I mean when I say it's not a natural thing, in the sense that we have evil forces constantly trying to suffocate us. And so Reagan was right that we have to constantly fight for it. And so we can feel it all the time, and it's getting worse and worse. And so, you had a wonderful conversation with Annie Cyrus before me, and she was saying the truth about all of that stuff. She's a brilliant, noble, courageous woman. And this is the key when people don't even see what's going on. I mean, just let me ask this. When was the last time that there was a jihadist attack, and on CNN, MSNBC, and let me even say Fox News. Now, don't get me wrong. Tucker Carlson, Hannity, Judge Janine, Laura Ingraham, lots of heroes there. Wonderful, beautiful people. But in terms of the Islam issue and what we're allowed and not allowed to say anymore, in the United States of America, you tell me the last time there was a jihadist attack, what guest was invited on a cable network in America where they were allowed to discuss not just what the jihadist attack was about, but the Quranic foundations to that jihadist attack? Brandon, that's not allowed to be discussed in our society anymore. Not in the mainstream, quote unquote, establishment. There's certain boundaries of discourse now that are not allowed. And it's already here. The Islamic blasphemy codes are here. There are many segments in America where you cannot discuss the Islamic theological foundations to jihad. That's already not allowed. There's lots of other things that aren't allowed to be discussed anymore. And so the suffocation is growing and growing and growing. And heroes like you and Mike Lindell and this particular forum that you have, thank God for it. But it's fewer and fewer places where we can speak. And I can feel it in my bones that this very evil totalitarian suffocation is accelerating. It's speeding up. And we have to lean on our faith in Jesus Christ. We know that Jesus is already won. We know that his crucifixion and that his resurrection and the blood that he shed for us, that victory has already happened. But that does not mean that we also do not fight and try to do the right thing at the same time, to try to fight on the side of justice and freedom.
Absolutely. Jimmy Glazov. Well, let's throw the cover back up there so folks can see that. United in Hate, the left's romance with tyranny and terror. I hope you'll secure a copy. He also, by the way, folks, is the editor at frontpagemag.com, frontpagemag.com. You guys see the stack of stuff? It's not uncommon for me to walk around with a stack of stuff like this, my stack. I mean, it's not always the same stack. This is just the stack from the last couple of days. And I was in I was in Mitchell, South Dakota at the Corn Palace, and I was walking around with not this stack, but a stack about this big. And I was walking around with this stack. I'd just gotten done doing, I don't know, something. And Mike had asked me to walk out at the MC and say something for a few minutes. And I had a stack of stuff, and I dropped that stack of stuff down. And he said, "What is all that?" I said, "Oh, that's some of my reading material and literature for today." So I'm always printing things out and marking them up and flagging them. And I literally have file cabinets full of this. But the point I'm making is, if you were to go through my stack of stuff today that I've been going through, what would you find? There's an article from Front Page Mag. 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 Front Page Mag. Front Page Mag. Front Page Mag, frontpagemag.com. You getting the idea here, folks? I like Front Page Mag. I like a lot of their articles. I link to them on my website, and I'm dealing with the editor of Front Page Mag right now. So I get a lot of education there. It's a lot of good stuff. I don't visit a lot of sites because a lot of sites out there, they don't have any stuff that really educates me, but I do learn stuff, obviously, when I go to frontpagemag.com. So I am promoting it because I like going there and I like reading some of the people, and particularly I had on the other night, thanks to Jamie, Daniel Greenfield. You talk about smart people, Jamie Glazov, Annie Cyrus, Daniel Greenfield, smart people. Now, let me ask you about this. And by the way, Mike Lindell should be coming into the studio very, very soon. Any moment, I expect to hear him come walking in. And when we do, Logan, we'll go to a break and we'll reset. We'll get him a chair, and we'll have Mike Lindell at the news desk with us. So just be ready to go to a break, and that's when we'll say goodbye to Jamie. But in the meantime, I'm going to take advantage of the opportunity for a few more minutes at least. Jamie, I'm looking at something I've talked about on the air here. I don't know if you know this or not, but this is a bulletin, Summary of Terrorism Threat to the U.S. Homeland, put out by the Department of Homeland Security May 14th, and it's active until August 13th. And it goes on to talk about adversaries and conspiracy theories concerning the origins of COVID-19 and effectiveness of vaccines. That's very interesting because it seems as though it's all over the news today. People, even the mainstream media now, are talking about where did this virus come from? Did it come out of this lab? You know, a few months ago, the last several months, you've been a crazy kook to talk about it. Now it's reaching into the mainstream media. But the Department of Homeland Security says, summary of terrorism threat to the U.S. homeland. They're worried about people talking about the origins of the COVID-19 and effectiveness of the vaccine. But on the last page, the Department of Homeland Security is collaborating with industry partners to identify and respond to those individuals attempting to radicalize others through spreading disinformation, conspiracy theories, and false narratives on social media and other online platforms. Now, I don't know about you, but you talk about your family escaping persecution from the USSR. When you have the Department of Homeland Security saying they're going to identify and respond to those that they think are spreading disinformation, conspiracy theories, and false narratives on social media and other online platforms, who are they to define what is disinformation? From a government that lies to us nonstop. I mean, that's the kettle calling the pot black. The government, the federal government, puts out disinformation all the time. They put out propaganda and false narratives all the time. And they deem something to be a conspiracy theory when the reality is most of them in the federal government are committing federal conspiracy crimes. Federal crimes. So here's the DHS. Doesn't that sound an awful lot like the former USSR to you, Jamie?
Absolutely. There's so much to say, but I will say this. Stephen Coughlin has written a book called Catastrophic Failure. It is a must-read. He said a million important things, and one of them was that America was failing in making a threat assessment. The left has succeeded in what you're saying, for instance, in it's diverting us in terms of what we think the real threats are. So the people in power now are focusing us on things that aren't threats, maybe are even good things that they're stifling. But Stephen Coughlin pointed out that the Muslim Brotherhood during the Obama administration had actually started formulating our foreign policy. It negated, the Obama administration, for instance, made it impossible to make a threat assessment. For instance, we talked about Phil Haney, God bless his soul. Yeah. He was doing an investigation. The Obama administration shut his investigation down because it was politically incorrect and because he was making a threat assessment. If Phil Haney would have been able to continue his investigations, the San Bernardino massacre would most likely not have occurred.
Plus Chattanooga, plus Little Rock, and he went through the whole list sitting on the platform of our conference, all the things he likely could have stopped by investigating those Islamists.
For instance, because of the policies implemented under the Obama administration, you couldn't think. They took it out of the intelligence agency training manuals. You couldn't talk about radical Islam. You couldn't talk about Islam. You couldn't talk about Sharia. So when you go and interview the Tsarnaev brothers, you can't ask them, do you believe in Sharia? You have to ask them what ice cream they like.
Right.
This is a tragedy. And so our society now, in terms of who's in power, this is the third term of the Obama administration. We are incapable of making a proper threat assessment in terms of who really wants to damage the United States. And that was the beauty of Donald Trump, and God bless Donald Trump. They had to get rid of Donald Trump. They had to get rid of him because he loves America. He wanted to defend America. He wanted to make a proper threat assessment. He had good people around him. Well, mostly, to the best of his effort. And they suffered, as we know, heroes like Michael Flynn, et cetera, et cetera. I mean,
Right.
Michael Flynn is a hero. But they removed Trump in very bad ways. We know how he was persecuted. And now we have these particular individuals in power again. And their agenda, and they want to destroy America because they hate this country. And it's as simple as that.
Absolutely. Jimmy Glazov has been my guest, frontpagemag.com. His book, I hope you'll go get a copy. Any other website you want to promote before we let you go, Jamie?
Well, absolutely. What an honor to work with David Horowitz. He is a hero of our time, a former leftist who left the left and dedicated his life to exposing the evil of the Marxist idea because it causes so much damage. So I'm the editor of his website, frontpagemag.com. But also go to my site, jamieglazov.com, and I have my TV show with Annie Cyrus. She's the producer, The Glazov Gang. We can't handle it at YouTube anymore. They're censoring us, just deleting our subscribers, deleting our views. They're just taking down our shows. It's just
that's why you're welcome here at Frank's Speech, because that's what that's all been about. Cancel culture, cancel culture, cancel culture, Jamie, as you know.
Exactly. But I just wanted to say we moved to Rumble. Please look up the Glazov Gang on Rumble. And I look very much forward to people visiting the Glazov Gang at Frank's Speech.
Yeah, we're going to get that done. I promised you I would help make that happen, and we'll get you with RJ and get that done. Okay, thank you for being with us, Jamie. We really appreciate it. And we got David Horowitz on Friday night about his new book. Thank you so much for being with us, Jamie.
It was a real honor and pleasure. Thank you for being on. Thank you for interviewing Annie before me, because if there's a hero in our world, it's Annie Cyrus.
Well, you both are. We were so honored to have both of you with us. Thank you, Jamie.
Take care. Thank you so much.